does not necessarily represent the makeup of the African community, the DNS community in terms of gender. Yes, I could see some looks from from the crowd, but bear with us today. And I think I want to, on the same breath, say that within AFTLD, we recognize contribution by women. We actually have one of our executive committee members, Wafad Ahmani, sitting there, who is doing good technical work in Tunisia. We had the immediate former president of the Nigerian CCTLD, Mary Uduma, who is also sitting in front, in the same desk, that has played a very active role insofar as African CCTLDs are concerned. And just to say that we have CCTLDs such as Lesotho that are run by women. We have CCTLDs such as Senegal. I think the entire technical team is made up of ladies. And so we have a number of women, just to name a few, across the continent that are doing some great work. So that said, Africa Top Level Domains Organization is the regional organization of country called Top Level Domains on the African continent. Of course, our work is basically to bring together all the country called top level domains in the African continent. Bob has just shown in the previous presentation that there are 51 functional CCTLDs in Africa. We do have 31 registries that are full members of Africa Top Level Domains Organization. And I must say that it's been a long way for the CCTLDs in Africa. And we recognize the support that we've received from organizations such as ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and the Internet Society in making sure that we are able to make our country code top level domain registries better. We also recognize the support that we've received from Afrinic, the numbers registry in Africa. I think for our first 10 or so years of existence, we were housed by Afrinic in Mauritius, which just shows how important it is for African institutions to work together. So the Secretariat is based in Nairobi. In terms of the organizational structure, this is how the organization looks. It's bottom up, even though it looks like top down because of the pyramid. So of course, the organization is member driven by the country code top level domain registries, who elect an executive committee or board. And then of course, there is a staff that does the day-to-day work. So AFTLD, basically, as I said before, is involved in capacity building initiatives, doing training for the CCTLDs, policy work in various spaces, such as the Africa Internet Governance Forum, and most importantly, promoting collaboration, coordination and cooperation among African country code top level domain registries. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of the countries that are members of Africa Top Level Domains Organization. We also have associate members, which are basically institutions that are not country code top level domain registries, but which support the growth and development of country code top level domain registries on the continent. So some of the institutions are here, like PCH, COCA. Majority of the registries are actually running the COCA registry software. And of course, most of you know ZACR, DNS in South Africa, and Lexinergy, which is one of the African registrars. So my presentation will be very brief. Next slide. We are seeing a trend in which a number of, there's a lot of interest from African governments in either regulating or being involved in management of country code top level domain registries. Of course, you've heard that this is a profitable sector or a profitable industry, and we are seeing a trend in which there is interest because of the potential revenue that countries can be able to make from country code top level domain registries. That said, country code top-level domain registries are also, I'll try and speak slowly for the translators. That said, country code top-level domain registries are also classified as critical internet resources in our respective countries. For example, .eg represents Egypt. .ke represents Kenya. So it's a national brand. It's normally a challenge when you receive an email from a government officer on a Gmail or Yahoo address. You think it's a fake email in most cases, but when it's sent from a country code, then in most cases there is legitimacy to it. Let's just have the next slide, please, or rather the next page. So I just want to share a few statistics. The last page, please. Okay, there. So in terms of company structure and ownership of registries in Africa, I was just going through the list of registries, doing some desktop research, and I noticed that as at now or currently, about 45% of the country code top-level domain registries on the continent are either government-owned or operate within an entity or framework that is regulated by the government. That is, it's either a regulator or a government-sanctioned institutions. We do have 12% of the registries that are run within a university setup or a university framework. And I think within Egypt, we have the Egyptian Education Network. Sorry? Or Egyptian University Network that is running the CCTLD, just as an example. And then in terms of CCTLDs that are operated privately, we have about 26% of all the country code top-level domains in Africa. And the ones that use a public-private partnership are 17%. We do encourage most CCTLDs to utilize what is called the 3R model or registry, registrar, registrant model that normally emphasizes the use of a public-private partnership model. So we encourage citizens in most countries to participate in the running of their country code top-level domain registries. In terms of automation, we have at least 58% of the registries that are running some software that allows registrants to register a domain name. That said, we still have some work to do in the marketing front in terms of connecting these to payment gateways so that people are actually able to buy these domains online using a seamless approach. So I can see the moderator is already up, but I will stop there for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrack. Barrack, you know, I think the organizers invited you to this panel because you are representing all CCTLDs, because you are the secretary of the AFTLD. That's why we didn't have all the representative of the CCTLDs that you mentioned. I think this is their idea. I would like to tell you that most of our CCTLD managers are struggling because they don't have sufficient registration. And what you see everyone using using Gmail, using Yahoo, using all those free of charge services. They are not free of charge. Nothing is free of charge. You are paying that. You are paying them by your data, by your information. So I think that it is very important for us as African to always use our CCTLDs and use dotAfrica. We need to make the market in Africa grow. Now it is not growing at all. We need it to be better. And this is our duty, our responsibility. Thank you again, Barrack. So now, last but not the least, Mohamed Maselhi, we speak about who is RDS and the impact of the global data protection registration. This is a new, regulation. This is a new regulation, new European regulation, and Mohamed will explain us the impact of this regulation. Mohamed is a senior operation manager at the National Telecommunication Regulatory Authority of Egypt, the NTRA, or the host here, since February 2010. He is responsible for managing the country code IDN in Arabic script, which is .masr. Mohamed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, in this presentation, we will talk about the difference between who is RDS and GDPR. So let me first refresh your minds about what's who is. Who is an internet service that provides information about a domain name. Those domain names are registered through a company called registrars, which is accredited from ICANN. When a new domain name is registered, the registrar has to make sure that the registration information publicly available, and this information can be looked up using the who is service, which we are talking about. So what information does who is has? Actually, the who is records are different from registrars to others. However, there is a mandatory information that should be collected. Some of them are name of registrar, creation date, expiration date, as well as some contact information like name, organization address, phone number, and email address. RDS is a registration directory service. Is the next generation to replace who is, and is trying to make a balance between accuracy, access, privacy, and accountability. Next slide, please. So, what makes RDS different? Firstly, who is provide one size fit all public data. It's publicly accessible to anonymous or to everyone, with a little accountability, with a limited individual privacy protection, and also with a limited ability to ensure data integrity. So there is a lack of security and auditing capability. The proposed RDS was designed to address this shortcoming. In RDS, some registration data would remain public to promote internet stability and to meet basic DNS needs. And this data is called the minimum public data set. It will be accessible by anyone without authentication. And other data would remain private and need authentication to be disclosed. So RDS allow access to some registration data to be publicly available and allow gated access to more sensitive data. Next slide, please. For RDS to work, there are two models that was supposed. One of them is called synchronized RDS or SRDS, that store copy of the data. So where the RDS are collecting copies periodically from all GTLD. And the other one, the other model, is the federated RDS, which obtain data in a real time. So every query or a request which asks the RDS repository will go directly to the GDLT in a real time and come back with the results. Also note that the entire RDS data set cannot be exported in bulk. That's why third-party service provider that use who is bulk data today will be able to use this new RDS framework with more innovative and different ways. Any seconds? Next slide, please. As we told that RDS allows some access with a gated access to more sensitive registration data. As GTLD registrar is no longer obligated to collect and validate who is contact data and make contact validation, compliance, and data protection, this burden has shifted to a validator role, and registrar application focus on a DNS-related data. For example, who is port 43 was working for the who is will be shifted to the synchronized RDS model that we state about. Registry will use EBP to supply and updates information to SRDS, which is a synchronized RDS. Next slide, please. So how RDS improve our life? RDS give registrant and contact holder a greater control over their personal data. It also applies standard validation to all data and the option to further identity theft, while using gated access to deliver purpose-based access with greater accountability and security. It uses a rules engine to enforce RDS policy harmonized with data protection and privacy law, and support accredited privacy proxy service to secure protected credential. In RDS, registrant will have more visibility into what their data is used for, ability to enter and update their data more easily, more flexibility and control over what data is public, options to prevent fraudulent use of their data, and greater assurance that privacy, data protection, security, and auditing policy will be uniformly applied. Access to data will be limited to those with a need to know, and the important thing that requesters who access data will be held accountable. Next slide, please. To know the timeline and the milestone of RDS, we should go back. In April 2015, the ICANN board reaffirmed its request for a board-initiated GNSO policy development process to define the purpose of collecting and maintaining and providing access to generic top-level domain registration data, and to consider safeguard for protecting data. Using this recommendation, the expert work group was formed. The working group for GTLD registration directory service have been working to provide a foundations. It actually grown significantly since ICANN 58. I think now it's currently, the working group hold more than 200 members and more than 170 observers. Issues had grown significantly. So for example, in phase 1, they are focusing initially on a minimum public data set, which will be publicly available for anonymous access. It's trying to answer 4 charter questions, which is about user and purpose, who should have access to the registration data in the minimum public data set, gated access, what steps should be taken to control data access, and data element, what data is the minimum public set should be collected. The final question they are concerned about in this phase is a privacy for the minimum public data set, only what steps should be needed to protect data and privacy. Next slide, please. So let's define what's GDPR. Okay, I'm trying to. So GDPR is a general data protection regulation. The primary objective of it is to give a citizen back control of their personal data and to simplify the regulatory environment for international business. This regulation within the European Union, when GDPR takes effect, it will replace the Data Protection Directive, officially Directive 95 from 1995. Its regulation was adopted on 27 of April last year, and it will be applied 25 of May next year, 2018. So after 2-year transition period, compliance with GDPR can also be a business opportunity for organizations to get right to present themselves as a trusted, responsible, and ethical. Business and consumer understand that they need to share some of their data with third-party organizations, but they rightly expect that information to be kept safe. That's why domain name companies are paying close attention to GDPR. Next slide, please. The GDPR will be applicable to all EU countries, but has implication also in countries outside EU as well. African business will have to follow these regulations as a compliance is necessary where business data is being transmitted to or from an EU. So take care that GDPR will apply where business in Africa do one of the following. If they do process the data of an EU member state citizen or a temporary resident, have employee based on EU member state, offer goods or service in an EU member state, or have a partnership with any EU business. Next slide, please. So what do domain name companies should do to comply with GDPR? It has to determine where and how the personal information of the data subject is processed, This will then assist them to plan accordingly to make sure that appropriate measures are taken to ensure compliance with GDPR. All parties that contract with ICANN will be impacted. This include registrar, registry, data companies, and even ICANN itself. Since ICANN is spelling out the requirement on that and what needs to be collected and how data is being dealt, ICANN is also a data controller, and the default is that data should not be collected and processed. So we have to, our party will need to have two good reasons for collecting data and an even better one for publishing the data. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mohamed. Of course, you understand very well the impact of the GDPR, excuse me, on our own industry, DNS industry, because as he said, this will not apply only to European companies residing in Europe. They are applied also to non-European companies that are resident in Europe, and also for European companies residing outside Europe. So, and you know that we, in our region especially, we are dealing a lot with the European companies. So since those companies have to comply with the GDPR, they will not make business with us, transaction with us, if we don't. So we have a lot of things to do. How many countries in Africa has a regulation for data protection? And those who has this regulation, how is this regulation compared to the GDPR? There is a lot of things to be done, and we have only a few months. So I think we have a lot of things to do before May. So thank you, our panelists. Now I will give the floor to you, to the attendees. If you have questions or comments, please ask direct question. Don't make long speech. Don't make long analysis. Just your comment or your question. Thank you. Who wants to speak? Oh, good. You understood everything? You don't have anything to ask? Okay, please.
Thank you. My name is Yavi. Just a comment to emphasize what you said in the last presentation. GDPR, data protection, privacy are a topic very important. So what we are trying to do also to support the community is to give more information. I'm very happy that this topic is part of the session. So we are also planning a webinar for next week at 6 p.m. So we'll share the information to talk about the same topic. So you raised the point, do we know what is happening in our countries? Do we know more about this topic? So you are all invited to attend this webinar. It will be online, so we'll share more information. And I also want to take the opportunity to inform you that we have a mailing list hosted by Afrinic that is called African. So if you go to Afrinic website, there is a mailing list called African. Please subscribe to this mailing list. We used to share information related to ICANN and the community via this mailing list. So you are invited for this webinar on Tuesday next week. Just save the date. We'll share more information about the timing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaovi. Any other remark? Yes, please, Jimson.
Thank you very much. This is Jimson Ulufuye speaking. I would like to really thank the panelists. It's very informative information provided. My question is to all of you, particularly Barrack and Loki. Looking at the model of managing the CCTLDs in Africa, quite diverse. So what do you think is the best model, since we are looking at transforming Africa digitally, and there is need for uptake of this domain, and the management structure, a structural approach is very important, even to a speedy uptake of the domain names in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimson. We will collect all the question and then give you the floor to answer them. Next one is Timulali.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma réaction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment about the regulations and the protection of data for the